think that the last time we talked was in 2022, probably, when we recorded, when we recorded a podcast for my past show for the transformation journey. So yeah, it was a long time ago, and like many things have changed since, like in your life and in my life. Like back then, I was like planning on I was planning my future for after high school. I was still in high school. I was still like doing the book blog thing. And I remember we were gonna be traveling to Europe. You were still gonna get married. You were gonna be publishing your book, and so that was back then, and many things were gonna be happening. But like many things have changed. Now you have a baby. That's a new thing as well. You're a father now. So yeah, I'm excited to get into this, and like I wanna just get started by like talking about traveling, because that's something that we have done a lot, like in the past times that we have been chatting, and like what has been in this 2 or 3 years, in the last 2 or 3 years, like a trip that you really like got a lot out of.
Yeah, I have a great story to kick off the show that will not only provide value to you, but it will also provide value to the audience. So, absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, sure. No, go ahead.
You want me to tell the story?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, my wife and I went back to Europe. We did about 6 different countries for our honeymoon. So we had just gotten married a couple of months earlier in Aruba. We brought 75 of our friends and family down to that little island in the Caribbean. We had an amazing wedding. And then we decided to go all out on our honeymoon. So we hit a bunch of different countries. We started in Spain, then we went to Norway, but eventually we ended up in Croatia. And what was really unique about Croatia is we stayed just outside of this city called Dubrovnik. Dubrovnik is beautiful. They filmed a lot of the Game of Thrones scenes with King's Landing in Dubrovnik. It's a beautiful old castle city. Now, we were staying about a half an hour away in this tiny little beach area, only a handful of hotels and restaurants. Population might have been 1,000 people. And just for context, for anybody listening or watching, Dubrovnik by itself only has a population of about 50,000 people, I think. So it's a pretty small city. So we're out in the middle of nowhere, and Rachel looks across the bay, and she sees a club. She sees the lights kind of popping off. And we had just finished up dinner, so she said, why don't we take a walk around the water, go find out what this club is all about. So we're taking this walk. It's about 45 minutes. And just before we get to the club, she sees this beautiful Mediterranean restaurant, small little spot on the ocean. The sun is going down. She says, tomorrow we should eat here. And we looked to make a reservation, but it was packed. And so we said, after we go have a couple of drinks at this outdoor club, when we're walking back, we'll stop and make a reservation for tomorrow night. So we go to this little club. We're having a couple of drinks. We're really enjoying. There's live music. The ocean is slapping up against the rocks. Such a beautiful experience. We're right in the middle of our honeymoon. But on the walk back, we stayed a little later than we wanted to. The restaurant's closed. The doors are closed. There's not a single person outside. And she's all bummed out. But here I am, a little bit of liquid confidence. It's our honeymoon. I'm going to make something happen. So I said, let me go inside and see if there's anybody cleaning up. That was my attitude at the time. Reality is negotiable, right? Let's take advantage of it. So I go inside of this restaurant, the door opens up, and there's a young guy kind of cleaning up and putting silverware away in the back. And I kind of barge in and I say, excuse me, I'm on my honeymoon. We saw the restaurant earlier during sunset. It was beautiful. I'd like to make a reservation for tomorrow night. And this guy turns around. Remind you, we're in the middle of nowhere in Croatia, outside of this tiny little city. And he turns around and he looks at me and he says, of course, I'm happy to make that happen. By the way, I'm a huge fan of yours. And I'm getting goosebumps again telling the story. And I think to myself, of course he has no idea who I am. He's probably mistaking me for somebody else. So I said, what do you mean? And he says, Nick, from BookThinkers, right? And Rachel, I turn around and look at her, make sure I'm not like too drunk. And I said, what do you know about BookThinkers? And he goes off on this 10-minute long story about how he started following me years and years earlier, how he would watch all of the content, read all of the book recommendations. And he was referencing things that I had only posted on our stories or only talked about on our podcast from years ago. For example, he said, I thought it was really cool when you were at MJ DeMarco's house, who wrote The Millionaire Fastlane, and you were playing basketball in his home gym. And I thought, wow, I only posted that on a story like 3 years ago. How does he remember that? And then he starts reciting lines from The Millionaire Fastlane and talking about how big of an impact that book had on his life. And so, of course, he helped us make a reservation in the perfect seat for the following evening. So we go back, and, Rachel's texting her family, hey, this guy recognized Nick across the ocean. Yeah, we do 1 million impressions a month, but that kind of stuff doesn't really happen, right? I'm not actually famous, but it was cool to feel that I had actually had an impact on his life. So we go back the following night. We have this amazing dinner. I got this fresh fish. We're having drinks, we're having wine, all this stuff. And he's our individual server. Even though he normally busses tables, he told the staff about the situation. They let him serve us, which was really cool. And towards the end of the night, we go to wrap up our tab, and he pays for the whole thing, which, by the way, for him was a lot of money. And we would not have ordered bottles of wine had we known he was going to do this, although I'm sure the restaurant took care of him. Now, he was telling me about how much of an impact MJ DeMarco had on his life. So what did I do? I went home, and as a way to say thank you, I reached out to MJ. I had him personally sign a couple of books to Tony, and I sent them to Tony in his home country because he was only just working summers in Croatia. He received these
Where
books.
was he from?
Romania. So he got these books, and then he sent me this beautiful letter. I actually keep it on my bookshelves, where he wrote 3 or 4 pages about how he cried when he received the books and about how much he's been saving money and he's taking all of this amazing action. And so I learned 2 lessons from this story, Emiliano. Number 1 is that impact as a creator, when you host a podcast or I host a podcast, it's only felt through feedback. You only know the impact you're having if somebody reaches out to tell you about it, because he had never DM'd me. He had never emailed me, yet I had changed this young guy's life through the content that I was posting and through the interviews that I was having. And so impact is only felt through feedback. If you're listening or watching to this show and Emiliano has had a positive impact on your life through any of his adventures, social media posts, podcasts, or business, reach out, say thank you. As a creator, it takes a lot of effort to host shows like this, and it also takes a lot of effort to produce content. Sometimes you don't know who's watching. And so reach out, say thank you, because again, impact is only felt through feedback. And the other thing is this: if Tony can do it on the other side of the world, make all this progress, read these books, implement this type of material, we don't have an excuse. We can live up to our potential too. So it's a good lesson for some of us who grew up in a little bit more of a fortunate situation to compare ourselves to somebody who didn't, but still made it happen. So that was a recent travel experience, maybe about 1.5 years ago, and I think about it all the time.
It's very interesting that you bring this point of like the impact that you create in people and how that like at least it makes you feel good, because like I have experienced that mostly like on social media when I had the book blog, that some people sometimes reached out and they just wanted to share that a book that I shared or some idea that I talked about was beneficial for them. But like, I mean, it's incredible that you had such an experience and like in such an unexpected way. Because like maybe if you went to, I don't know, like New York or some other big city in the United States, you would think like, okay, maybe here I can find someone who might know me, but you wouldn't be thinking that would happen like on the other side of the world in such a small country and in such like an again unexpected situation. And yeah, because like for example, in my case right now with this podcast that I'm starting again, my idea, as I was sharing with you before, was that like this is like a vehicle and a tool for me to connect, yeah, with people like you and with other like, yeah, influencers, business people, engineers, travel guys that I want to like build a network with. But I'm thinking that like as a vehicle for myself, through which I can also like generate some impact in other people. And I think that that's also like valuable from doing things like this. Because like I'm not sure if I have asked you like what was the main reason why you started Book Thinkers. If it was like for a business purpose or just for sharing like the insights that you had from books.
It started as an outlet for me just to share the books that were changing my life. So if I go back to 2015, I had just taken an
10 years
internship
ago.
at a local software company. Yeah, in the Boston, Massachusetts area. And my boss at the time, his name is Kyle, is the director of sales at this company. He brought me on a couple of local sales trips. And at the time, I was a little arrogant. I was a little bit of a know-it-all. I was kind of a hotshot business guy, right? Just about to graduate school. I think Kyle was sick and tired of my attitude. So he would say things like, hey, do you mind if we put a podcast on? And at the time, I had never listened to a podcast before. But he said, you should, because listening to the same song or the same playlist on the way to work every day isn't going to change your life, but the right business conversation might. And so he started to play these episodes where these famous business people were showing up and sharing their tips and tricks and strategies for success for free. And you could listen to these shows in an hour or less and learn something useful. And that was brand new for me at the time. So Emiliano, I was commuting about an hour each way, 5 days a week that summer, going to and from this internship. So I'd listen to one episode on the way there, one episode on the way back. And over the course of a couple of weeks, I kept hearing the same books. A lot of these successful people were giving at least some credit for their success, financial, physical, relationship-based, spiritual success, to the same books. Books like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, or Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, or How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And after a while, I said, you know, if books play such a big role in their success, I should read books too. So I went to a local Barnes & Noble, which is a book chain here in the US, and I grabbed a couple of books and I went back, and every day when I would finish my work, I would close the office door and I would read. And very quickly, I started to solve problems in my life. One of the first problems I solved was financial illiteracy. Despite the fact that I grew up in the United States in a great upper middle class family, despite the fact that I was in my third year of business school, I didn't know anything about money. And so I read a few books on personal finance. And within a couple of weeks, I went from financially illiterate to leading conversations about money with friends and family. And I thought, what other areas of my life could I apply this to? So I started to read about everything, books that solved every problem or built every skill that I possibly wanted to understand. And that's why I started sharing them on social media. They were having such a profound impact on my life that I just wanted my friends and family to rise with me instead of rising against them. Because as you know, as Jim Rohn says, we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And if you spend time with 5 bums, you're going to be the 6th bum. But if you spend time with 5 motivated young hustlers, you're going to be the 6th motivated young hustler, right? So I was trying to influence my friends, and that's why I started sharing books. So it was not originally to monetize anything. BookThinkers is now a 7-figure business. But it was just impact, man. That's all. Things that were helping me.
I want to unpack two things from here. Like, one part is how Book Thinkers started to develop for you as a vehicle to create your own economy. I remember we were talking about that in our last podcast. So yeah, I want to get into that. But like before that, this part of like influencing people around you. For example, right now that you have been, so how long have you been married for? Like 2 years?
Yes.
So, okay, and you've been with Rachel for like 7 years? 8?
Yeah, maybe like 6 or 7.
Oh, okay. So how has this process of trying to influence the people around you positively how has that been specifically like in your relationship? Because like I mean, like again, as I told you, like many things have happened since the last time we talked, and so like I shifted my life from like focusing only on entrepreneurship to then focusing on like living my high school life, and so I started like to be like dating with girls, and then like I had my first girlfriend, and then yeah, like having these experiences, and with that I have had like a different, yeah, like a perspective shift on these topics compared to like what I thought before, how I thought things would be. And so my point is, like before I like it made sense to me to be sharing these things with my friends, for example, because like they weren't too close to me to be affected negatively if I tried to like let's say force a book into them, or like to have them read a book. But like I think it might look a little different in like romantic relationships. Or what has been your experience with that?
That's a great question. That's a very mature question. And the answer might be different for every relationship. But with me and Rachel, in the early stages of our relationship, I was talking about books 24/7. And so she was sort of forced, at least she was introduced aggressively to some of these concepts. It was all I was talking about. It was all I was consuming. And so, of course, as I identified problems in her life, or as she identified problems in her life, or skills that she wanted to acquire, I always had a solution. Now, I think over time, I started to mature a little bit and slow down with that content and ask permission. Sometimes, as we know, there's a difference between masculine and feminine energy. It's funny when you generalize things. It's not true in every relationship, but generally speaking, men like to solve problems from a logical perspective, and sometimes women just want to feel heard. And so every time Rachel shares something with me, it's not always my job as a supportive partner to solve that problem for her. Sometimes it's important just to listen, and I still struggle with that. It's my natural tendency and inclination, not only as a man, but also as a business owner and as a personal development junkie, to say, oh, that's easy to solve. Here's the problem with your thinking, or here's the thing that's triggering you to feel that way. Let's just remove it, right? So I think now that I'm a little bit more mature, it's my goal to be supportive and loving and kind and tender and gentle, and not just aggressively trying to solve every problem. But we've had some great experiences with personal development information. I'll share one with you, which was we were driving down from Boston, Massachusetts to somewhere in Florida, which is a long drive. It takes about 2 or 3 days. And I put The 5 Love Languages, which is a very popular relationship book, on my phone, on an audiobook. And I said to her, hey, every once in a while we have a tough time communicating with each other. I heard this is a really important book for communication. Do you mind if we listen to it while we drive? And we had such amazing conversations throughout that journey. We would listen for 30 minutes, and then she would pause it, and we would talk about something for an hour. And then we would listen for 10 more minutes, and we would pause it and talk for another hour. And then we would listen for an hour and talk for 30 minutes. So we had such great conversation about the book and about each other. And now I know her love languages. I know the way that she likes to show love versus the way that she likes to receive love. They're different. And she knows my love languages. She knows the ways that I like to show love versus receive love. And they're different. And it's an entirely different language. And so there are ways that our relationship has definitely improved. And there are ways that personal development has gotten in the way, for short periods of time. And I need to step back and say, Rachel is my wife. She was my fiance. And before that, she was my girlfriend. That's the role that she plays in my life. Yes, together, we are now parents. We need to be unified in the way that we're approaching certain things. But I don't have control over her health or her mindset. And I need to be okay with that. And if she's struggling with something and just wants me to listen, I have to be mature enough not to try to solve the problem.
how has this part also like struck you, like trying to let go of having that control? How has that struck you in your relationship and as a father during the experience of like raising a child?
It Thankfully I did a lot of that work before the kid came. When I was in my early 20s, I definitely had control issues. I was very territorial in relationships. I was controlling in relationships. I also wasn't able to change my mind on things. I would defend things even if I was wrong. And so over the last 10 years or so, generally speaking, from 21 to 31, I've worked a lot on myself, removing ego, removing the need to control. I really got into stoicism. There's a concept in stoicism called amor fati, the love of one's fate. And you have to view everything outside of your control as objectively neutral or maybe even positive. And understanding the difference between what's in my control and what's not in my control took a long time. It was a little bumpy. But as I realized that ego is the enemy, and as I was able to let go, life started to improve. And so having a kid hasn't impacted me personally at all in a negative way because I did the work before the kid came. So now I'm much more able to be in flow and not be negatively impacted by things. One other thing I'll share is that I've spent the last 10 years practicing different forms of mindfulness, specifically different meditations. And I've developed a lot more emotional intelligence. When I receive an input to my brain that would have previously triggered a negative emotional reaction, I'm now able to slow things down and process it and choose my response, to weigh more variables, to zoom out a little bit. And that's made parenting a lot easier than it would have if I didn't do those things before.
I know that like a lot of these things are developed through practice. So as you say, like this mindset and this character that you've developed has been like a result of work over the years. So like it's not a thing that you started once you knew that you were gonna become a parent. So it was like a long time before that. But like how have you been able to manage setbacks in some way, or like not specifically setbacks, but like maybe times when you haven't been able to practice these things too much? So like times when you haven't been able to read that much or to meditate, like this things might cause, well, not having these things might cause you to like have some setbacks with these things. So you might be triggered more often. How have you managed those things?
I have a few different things to share. The first is that momentum works in both ways. And so you can build a lot of momentum with mindfulness. And if you choose to stop practicing because life gets tough, momentum will work in the other direction and it will be really hard to pick those things back up. And so the way to solve for that is if I don't have 10 minutes to meditate, I do have 30 seconds to meditate. If I don't have an hour to exercise, I do have 5 minutes to exercise. And so instead of removing the activity and losing the momentum, I think it's okay just to shrink that activity down to a place where it is manageable. And for anybody in the audience today, and I'm speaking to you directly, if you ever feel like you're in a space in your life where you don't have the time to work on these things that do compound and would lose momentum if you stopped, just look at your screen time on your cell phone and you'll quickly be reminded that there is space. If you can watch Instagram for 2 hours a day, if you can watch YouTube for 2 hours a day, if you can watch Netflix for 2 hours a day, you can meditate for 5 or 10 minutes so that you don't lose the forward momentum. That's the first thing I want to share. Brian Tracy calls that the law of accumulation. You can accumulate forward momentum. You can also accumulate negative momentum. And you want to be really, really careful of that. The common metaphor to think about applying this in the gym, for instance, is instead of making your goal exercising for an hour, make your goal to get to the gym and just pick up one weight. If you have to leave immediately, that's okay. But you got the rep in, and that's what matters. And oftentimes you'll find once you're at the gym and you pick up one weight, okay, you have 5 or 10 or 20 minutes to actually do something a little bit more before you leave, right? So I hope that helps. I think it's shrinking the activity so that it becomes manageable even in difficult situations. The other thing that I wanted to share is that as a business owner, I've had to understand that failure is part of the process. And without trying to sound too cliche, when you accept failure as part of the process, it doesn't surprise you. It's the surprising nature of failure that knocks people off course. But it doesn't surprise me. I know that it's part of the process. Yes, failure accelerates progress in learning. Yes, failure is the best teacher. But when you say it that way, people glaze over it. What I'm trying to portray to you specifically is that when you expect it, it doesn't surprise you. And it's the surprising nature of failure that knocks you off course. If you eliminate that, then it's easier to deal with, I think.
I have been also like listening or reading a lot about like this idea of like second order feelings. So like feelings that you have about feelings, or like thoughts that you have about thoughts. And I think it relates to like this last part that you're sharing. Because like, yeah, many times something unexpected or something not ideal happens, but it's like, okay, that's somewhat negative for our path or whatever. But then like the thoughts and like feelings and after the parts after that that we start to engage with keep holding us back. And I've also been thinking, I have been thinking a lot about momentum in this way as well, like in the both, how it compounds positively towards your vision and negatively. And I saw that like, well, after, so I finished high school and then I was like backpacking for half a year, and then like after that I had like no concrete or solid vision for my path afterwards, and this was like in December, so it was just like 2-3 months ago. But like I had these thoughts in my mind of like, oh yeah, I'm not sure what I will be doing with my life over the next 4 years or like 6 years or whatever, and like just having that idea, it starts to compound, and like having that idea and not having some action to go in the other direction started like to knock me down and to get me into this like spiral where I was even just like being reactive with people, because I had like this inner dilemma of not knowing what I would be doing with my life. So I mean that's interesting. Then like I want to like shift the conversation back into like how you have developed momentum with BookThinkers over the years, and how you have like been shifting its path, because it started just as an Instagram blog, then it shifted into a marketing agency where you were like doing advertising for authors in like with your audience. And then like I remember like in 2022 when we were talking, like because of like reels and this changes in like social media platforms, this change happened where like this was not a sustainable business model anymore, and then you started like doing video editing, I think. So I would just like you like to dive into how the path for BookThinkers has been over the last 2-3 years, how you have managed it, and also like how has AI impacted like BookThinkers.
Yeah, sure. So going back to where the business was a couple of years ago, we were a small team, had a few people on the team. We were doing paid book reviews for authors. So we had a large community on Instagram mostly, and a podcast, and authors would pay us to talk about their books. A few things happened. Number one, a lot of other pages started to pop up in countries like India, Malaysia, Vietnam, or Mexico, for instance, where the US dollar goes a lot farther, right? We talked one time, I remember, about how money is relative. You know, the same $10 for me might be worth a lot more to somebody else. And so these pages started to pop up and accumulate followers very fast, and they were offering the same package as we were, but at a very, very, very low rate. And it became harder to differentiate and sell through to authors, even though our audience was maybe more US based and maybe a better fit for the book promotions. Authors just saw our price tag compared to other pages who had similar follower accounts and said, yeah, I just can't justify it. So I started to think about other ways to provide value to authors. And two main services have emerged that now represent about 80% of our business. One is short form video production for authors and thought leaders that also has a social media management component attached to it. And the other is podcast booking, placing authors on shows to talk about their books. Mm-hmm. Today, we now have 10 people on staff. We serve hundreds of authors a year, mostly video production and podcast booking. And we do still sell or package in our book promotions into those other packages as a way to incentivize authors to sign up and show them love in our community. We still do 1 million impressions a month on Instagram organically, and at least tens or hundreds of thousands on some of the other platforms. Mm-hmm. But that landscape is competitive, and there is not a single other bookstagrammer who has been able to take that original concept of a bookstagram and turn it into a marketing agency. And I was able to do that because of a couple of things. One, I'm actually implementing all of the business books that you see behind me. I'm not just posting about them, but I'm using them. I'm learning from them. I'm implementing them. And then number two, that software internship I had back when I was going into the end of my college experience, I took a full-time job with them after school, and they flew me all around the US and sometimes internationally, and I would do sales presentations. And so I got very used to the process of buying plane tickets, flying into a new city, renting a car, lugging equipment to somebody's office, and working with them. And that barrier of entry seemed pretty low for me. I knew how to price it. I knew how to execute it. And that's what it requires to do larger business deals with people. And so the video production piece, I think, was too much of a lift for anybody internationally because they couldn't constantly fly to the US. And for anybody that was running a book community domestically, they didn't have that same kind of experience that I did, where I was used to getting on a plane, renting a car, staying in a hotel, and eating at a diner every day, And so I had the ability to move pretty fast to generate a lot of early momentum. Once we standardized that process, it now became really difficult for other people to step into the space because we were offering more videos for a lower price at a faster turnaround than anybody else could. If you think about somebody like Elon Musk with his rockets today, nobody else can develop rocket technology where they're reusable because the barrier of entry is just too high. He's moved too fast. He's developed too much of a proprietary process. Nobody else can come even close. And so in a very, 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 very small way, that's what I was able to do with BookThinkers. Nobody else can book authors on podcasts at the rate that we can for the price we can, and nobody else can build video content as fast as we can in the same volume for the same price. And that's what happens when you work fast. That's the power of momentum. It becomes a competitive advantage. That's not to say that it will exist forever. AI is something you brought up. People are doing video content with AI. They're getting booked on podcasts with AI. But our fun differentiator is that human touch. I think in the world of AI, people are looking for human connection and imperfect content more than ever. And so a funny example of this is I actually got a book in the mail recently, and instead of that bestseller sticker that you see on the book, it said human made. That's how important it is to show people that you're not leveraging AI. So while AI has transformed the back end of my business, I've added 20 IQ points in my ability to communicate via email, for instance. We're not using it forward facing because people want the human connection. And that's how we've been able to stay ahead of it, I think.
That's interesting because, two things that I want to get into from here. So, one is the human component of the service part of business that comes with the development of AI.
I love that. I love that side. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. And the other one is being able to create differentiators for yourself And I want to like get into. So these are the two topics. But like we'll get into AI later. But like first into like differentiating yourself. I think this applies both for business and for your personal career in different ways. And I think of this like from my experience, from what I have been able to do, because like as I was sharing, like many work opportunities that have come, or like what I'm currently doing, which is like travel and personal development project with an author from, well, he's not an author yet, but with a client from North Carolina. Like this opportunity came after the podcast, and like my differentiator when I was doing the podcast was that I was like very young. I was like 14, 15. So that was interesting. But like I see that there's a lot of value in being able to like be different and to bring this personalized part into the services you provide. So for instance, like with this work that I'm currently doing, what made me like different for my client compared to other people that he could have like got into the project is that like I have this like online business background because of what I did with the book blog and those things. I have like this interest in different areas. So I'm like into personal development and philosophy, but I am also like into engineering and physics and science and like those things which we're also like trying to involve in the project, and into traveling. So that's like one part. And then another part like creative and like creative thought processes and like leadership. So like these things are what I have been like trying to build in my career as I keep like evolving to be able to like be different, like not just to be another content creator or maybe once like just another engineer or whatever. Like I haven't trained to like create these differences for myself, but I think like this might be difficult to think for some people based on their careers that they have had. So for example, some person that has only had like the traditional path, so like school, then a university, and then like staying in the same path of like being an accountant or a lawyer or a web developer or whatever. So like what do we think are like key things or questions to focus on to be able like to create this differentiators for yourself, just as you did for BookThinkers?
Great questions. The first thing I want to share with you is that one of my primary differentiators today at 31 years old is that I am still the youngest in every room. And so you will have the ability to leverage that for a long time. My average client is in their 40s or 50s or 60s. And so I will still be able to use that for another decade. And my biological age is only 23. And so I will feel young for a very long time as well. I think that, look at me today. I am a business owner who's covered in tattoos, but is also a book nerd. That's a little bit ironic. Who travels the world as his side hustle and is also a really proud husband and dad. I'm a fitness fanatic. I'm super into biohacking. I'm also into my faith in a big way. And so all of that together creates Nick Hutchison. And I am unique, depending on the room I'm in, based on some combination of those variables. I always will be. And the other differentiator from a business perspective, and there are differentiators within each service set, and I'll give you an example of one in a moment. But my differentiator in the book business is that I genuinely believe that the right book at the right time can permanently change somebody's life. I believe that with every fiber of my soul. And when I tell that to people, it comes across as authentic and honest and transparent and real and raw because it's true. I'm not in the business like most people are just to make money. If you think about somebody working an accounting job, do you really believe that they think the right debit credit balance at the right time will permanently change every business they work for forever? No, they don't believe that. So I'm in the business of transformation. And when an author meets me and they're evaluating different marketing companies, yes, again, our services are differentiated as well. But I love selling. That's the only area of the entire business that I have not delegated. Because my unique ability is to meet somebody, build a deep relationship, truly care about why they wrote the book they wrote, the impact they're trying to have, be their biggest cheerleader, and inspire them to take action within my business so that I can help them achieve their goals. It's not about numbers, it's about feeling. People want to feel like you're also aligned with their mission to create a positive impact. And so that's why I don't delegate anything else. Now, within our services, I'll give you an example. When we started offering podcast booking as a service, it was because I was getting 15 or 20 inbound inquiries every single week for my show, the BookThinkers Life-Changing Books podcast. Every single one of those inbound inquiries was general. Hey, podcaster. Maybe they would say, hey, Nick. And then they would just pitch via email 15 paragraphs of background credentials and book summary info. And, why were they doing that? Well, they were doing it because it's business. They were doing it because they represented an author, they sold them a podcast booking package, and now they needed to get some type of traction. Most of the time, the books weren't even a good fit for our show. And so I surveyed a bunch of our customers. They were paying for services like that. And I said, what are the biggest issues with the service that you're currently paying for? Well, number one, they had no guaranteed deliverable. They were buying podcast booking or PR services where they were going to get booked on shows because that person had a big list. So I said, okay, if I build one, we have to have a guaranteed deliverable. Today, we offer either 4, 8, or 12 shows per month, guaranteed. Number two, they were getting placed on shows that weren't in their niche. Somebody writes a business book and they're on a dog walking podcast. Not a good fit. So our second guarantee is you're always going to be presenting to your target customer. The third thing people would say is, I got locked into this long contract. 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and they stink. I wish I could cancel, but I already paid for it. And so we have no minimum contract. You can try it for 1 month. You'll get your guaranteed episodes in your niche. And if you don't like it, no hard feelings, you go away. And those 3 core differentiators within the service set make it a no-brainer for everybody that we talk to. And so differentiators, I think, can be personal. It's tying all of your unique interests together. It can be within the line of business that you do. It's my belief that the right book at the right time can permanently change your life, and I genuinely believe that. And then it's also within each service that we provide compared to everything else. So I hope that helps.
One short comment on this is that, even if someone didn't believe that you are authentic about that belief that you have about books, they could just look at how many years you have been working on this idea, on this belief, and that's enough to build credibility. So that's an interesting part. And I think these ideas that you're sharing relate to what we were talking about regarding AI and personalization and the human touch. Because I feel from the experience that I have had, based on that experience with AI being used in business, I think that for example, as you were saying, in the back end part of businesses, it's even essential. It's sometimes ideal, but many times essential to have technology and software and things that optimize and make everything more efficient. And that's this part of AI. But I've seen a lot of things and a lot of businesses and people trying to create a differentiator through personalization and through this human touch. So that's kind of what you're doing with BookThinkers in this way. You're not offering an AI platform for them to be booked into podcasts. You're offering them to use that efficiency and optimized processes that you have through AI with a human touch to provide the service, right?
Yes. And a great example of this, and I'll be brief because I know we're limited on time. Recently, we read the book Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara as our internal book club book. So most of the people on our BookThinkers team, we read the same book. We talk about how we can apply it. And not only have we implemented dozens of different small little 1% improvements from the book, but here's a very clear example. Normally, when I sell an author into our podcast booking service, they'll meet our podcast onboarding manager. His name is Evan, and they'll have a great intro call with them. Something small that we changed in our process is that the minute I make that introduction, he buys a copy of their book. And so by the time they have their onboarding call, he holds it up and he'll share something from a random page that he flips to that he learned from their book. The smiles that they have on their face are so incredible because we went slightly above and beyond. It wasn't anything crazy. It was a $15 or $20 improvement in our process. But that human interaction of a live onboarding call where they hold up a copy of the book and they say, Emiliano, we're really happy to serve you. In fact, I already had a chance to go through your book a little bit. I found this really interesting thing on page 42. Here's what it is. I think that process, that one little 1% improvement differentiates us.
Mm-hmm. What would you say are like ways where people can find their path to implement things like you did, but like in their specific niche?
Yeah, I would recommend using AI actually. So I'm at this point, ChatGPT is my best friend, my best business friend, I should say. What's unique about ChatGPT is that you don't have to be super specific with your prompt. You can get onto ChatGPT. You can, Emiliano, how old are you now?
19.
So you can get onto ChatGPT and you can say, hi, ChatGPT. My name is Emiliano. I'm 19 years old. Here are all the different projects I've worked on over the last few years. Here are all the interests I have. For instance, international travel and backpacking. Here are all the things I've learned from it, the different experiences I've had, the different places I've visited. You can also say, here are the questions I have about my future. I'm not sure what's unique about me. As I continue to freelance and build out kind of my ideal life, I feel frustrated that I don't know exactly what that looks like. And just air it all out. Voice to text it. That's what I do. I have a hotkey on my keyboard. I click it twice. I voice to text and I just talk. I provide as much context as humanly possible. And then at the end, you can ask a question like, what is unique about me? And it'll kick out a beautiful answer. Something I did recently was I invited 20 of my friends and family to give me 5 things that they think are unique about me. And then I fed all 20 responses into ChatGPT. And I said, based on their third-party objective perspectives, not mine, but like what they think, what is unique about me, right? And so you can use platforms like ChatGPT to synthesize, to analyze, to simplify, and to identify ways to communicate and articulate what makes you unique. So you could also do that with your business. We do it all the time. Here's our podcast booking process. Add every little detail humanly possible that you can think of, and then say, what are 5 little 1% improvements that we can make? And it'll kick them out instantly. And so at this point, there's no excuse not to do it because it's so cheap, you know?
Like you can even just like try it for free and have this things that can maybe then generate an income and then use that income to like pay for a more advanced version and then like keep evolving with that. So yeah, I mean that's interesting. I think I will do the like this unique questioning practice you mentioned. I'll try that. And then just to start wrapping up, like there are 3 questions I like to ask. Not really, well, they can be or cannot be like related to what we were talking. But like the first is, what's like, well, in your case, probably a book, but like a book, a movie, or a music album, or something that you have like consumed lately that you have like enjoyed a lot and had a lot of like value out of.
I am going through a book called 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy for the 5th or 6th time. And I learn something new every time. You know, that's a little bit more of a business book for people, but it is well written, it's mind-blowing, and it will show you that financial success is easier than you think it is.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I actually have heard a lot about that, and like I've watched a lot of reels that talk about it, or like those ideas. Then like another thing, maybe you can bring that book up in this question. What's one thing that you have recently learned or discovered that is like valuable or interesting?
There is so much. And by the way, I want to first, before I answer this question, say that I view success as holistic, not just financial. So I want to preface my answer before I answer this. But I think it's easy to quantify financial success, and so that's why it's easy to use as an example. When I view successful people, I think of them as healthy, wealthy, happy, and spiritually connected with great relationships, right? You have to check all of the boxes. Otherwise, you're not in harmony. So with that being said, a big takeaway that I had recently is that there is so much money on this planet. There are so many rich people living in wild abundance, and it's just a paradigm shift. That's what helps open you up to this idea of money consciousness. So I was rereading Think and Grow Rich recently, and it talks about this concept of money consciousness. You need to be open to abundance before you can receive abundance. And I saw this video on Instagram, kind of a controversial figure was posting it, but he was talking about how sometimes a new supercar will become available, millions of dollars, and he'll go to buy one and he's on a 3-year wait list. Or a new exclusive watch, millions of dollars, becomes available. Same day he goes to buy it, out of stock. Or he used an example. He was in Dubai paying 25,000 US dollars a night for his apartment, and he got kicked out of it because the landlord said somebody just came in with 35,000 a night. And so the point here is that there are wildly rich people on this planet. In major cities, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of million-dollar homes. And so the only limitation is your ability to think big. And that was an interesting breakthrough for me. Right after I had the breakthrough, we landed a really big contract. I can't really give any more details yet about it, but it's definitely the largest in the history of me doing business. So it's just funny, it's just funny. Money is relative. It really is.
I think that's also like in some way what I'm trying to do with the podcast, like trying to expand my mind to new realities. Yeah, like financially, but also like to like travel wise, like discovering new destinations that I hadn't thought about, or like business wise or whatever. So that's interesting. And then like the last part, and if you want to add like maybe where people can find you or whatever, like I will add those things like in the description of the episode, or like just one summary if you want to like share. But like before that, so my podcast is called Coffee Lounge because like I think that kind of represents me, because I like really love coffee, and I have like been drinking coffee for many years, and it's just a passion of mine. But like, what's your favorite coffee, either like bean or like method or like preparation, and what's maybe like a place you like to drink coffee at, or like a situation?
I have a great answer for this. I was never a coffee drinker until I visited Colombia. And my wife and I, we spent 3 months in Colombia, Medellin specifically. And one day we did a coffee tour to a finca, a small little coffee farm out in the mountains, maybe an hour outside of Medellin, Colombia. And we spent the day with this family. She might have been 3rd generation on the farm or something like that. We walked around, we got a tour of the plants, how long they take to grow. We then picked our own coffee beans and got to taste them. We got to view the roasting process, and then we got to grind our own coffee and taste the difference between junk and what they were preparing. And so I love Arabica beans grown at elevation, not Robusta beans grown, on the flatlands. I like sweet, kind of fruity coffee that's like a medium to light roast. And how it's prepared, I mean, it'd be amazing to always have a pour over or something like that, but we just do our own drip coffee. I grind the coffee right before I make it so that it's a little bit more fresh. I have a beautiful coffee machine at home. And so that's how that's how I do my coffee. And so I love like single origin Colombian or, from some Central or South American country. Every once in a while, like an African bean. But I just, I love my coffee too, man. I really do.
Cool. Do you like Mexican coffee?
I do. Yeah, I do. You'll have to send me something good.
I will. I might be actually launching a small like line of coffee to sell, but yeah, we'll see. But yeah, like Nick, thanks for coming to my show.
Yeah, you're very welcome. For anybody that wants to get in touch, you could just go to BookThinkers on Instagram. Feel free to DM me if you want any custom book recommendations or anything like that. But listen, man, it was a pleasure. I'm always happy to come back on and have another conversation because I know there's so much more that I'd love to share with you. And I love everything you're doing. 19 years old, still blows my mind. You have so much time to figure out what your unique ability is and how you want to communicate that to people. And also just know that it's going to change over time as well. So keep crushing it. And until next time, my friend, adios.
Cool.